that's what everybody wants. I mean, you want to know that your business is being run in a professional way. You want to know that you will make a profit, and at the same time, you need also, and I think all of us can appreciate that, peace of mind. So I think that's the challenge.
All right, welcome everyone. This is MTech Podcast. My name is Nikolai Shitichin, and I have Jim Johnson with me as a co-host. And today we have a guest. We have Hans-Henrik Pedersen with us. How you doing, guys?
Hi,
Great.
Nick. So, Hans-Henrik, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you. You work for Munters, and you're based in Denmark, but you're a global project team manager, as I understand it. So, welcome to the podcast. We're really looking forward to speaking to you today.
Well, thanks a lot, Jim, and thanks a lot, guys, for having me. Exciting opportunity to be here. It's my first appearance, so to speak.
All right, brilliant. And we really want to talk to you because I think that's very exciting. So, and my first question is usual about the history, how you started with poultry and what makes you stay in that area.
Yeah, well, when I first joined Munters Food Tech, that was some 5 years ago. It was first and foremost to get back into the food industry because I've sort of been away for some years, but wanted to return. And secondly, to join an exciting company like Munters with great ambitions on sustainable farming, increased animal welfare, and increased productivity, basically. So for me, the food industry has a lot to offer, as we're dealing with what's essentially the most important part of our daily life, which is food. I mean, everyone has an opinion about food, where it comes from, how it's been made, and by whom. And I think to all of us, including you guys working within the industry, we know how much fun and excitement this really can be. And I think in Munters Food Tech, for me, the exciting part is that we're dealing with the initial steps in the process, which you could say ultimately becomes the food on our plate, which is farming, animal farming to be precise. And to most of us, it becomes almost like an obsession that we constantly seek new ways to improve animal welfare, minimize environmental impact from animal production, and increase productivity. And ultimately, of course, we want to help the farmers improve the bottom line, whether they're small, medium, or large scale production.
All right, that's great. And nice looking poultry shed we have on the background.
Yeah.
Yeah, top marks, Hans-Henrik, for that. And you're based, as I said earlier, in Scandinavia, in Denmark. And I guess in your over the years, you've been looking at farming and seen a lot of farming and how it's structured in Scandinavia. Now, when we have guests on the podcast, we like to understand a little bit about their country and their region. How is farming structured? How does it work in Denmark, Sweden, and around in that region?
Well, yeah, Jim, you're right. I mean, regions are different. And I think if we look at Denmark, certainly, and to some extent also Sweden, we're talking about relatively small countries that share many similarities. And if we zoom in on Denmark, we will find a very small country. There's only about 6 million of us here. And we grow about 22 million pigs a year. We have a very strong agricultural industry, which has a great impact on the overall economy of Denmark. It's a long history of farming and tradition of being in the forefront when it comes to improving productivity. But first and foremost, animal welfare, I think, has always been one of the driving forces of Danish agriculture. And of course, during, you could say, probably the last 10 years or so, minimizing the environmental footprint or impact of farming. Because we all know that going forward, we need to produce more food, higher quality foods. We need to minimize the impact of the production on the environment. And balancing all those things, and at the same time ensuring that the farmer makes money, that puts a tremendous amount of pressure on an industry. And I think what sets Denmark a bit apart from many other countries is the fact that all the farmers are independent, in the sense that if you're a poultry farmer, you have your own business. Compared to U.S. scale, maybe a small business, but you're independent in the sense that you decide yourself what is it you want to grow in terms of genetics, what feed you want to feed your animals, how you want to design your house, how you want to ventilate your house, and how you want to run your operation. I think if we look at the pig industry, for example, which is a bit different, all the pig farmers in Denmark, they belong to a more than 100 years old cooperative that basically is why the Danish swine industry today is as strong as it is. So you could say that along with the kind of the strong tradition and the history, we also have vigorous regulation in the sense that politicians and changing governments over time have implemented regulatory procedures that probably are amongst, I think, the most vigorous and ambitious ones that we see anywhere in the world, which is putting, of course, even more pressure on the industry and on the farmer in particular to stay ahead, but even more so to ensure that he or she still has a good business.
Oh, wow. Very interesting, and it's quite different from the rest of the world, and like you mentioned, especially from US. And with the current state of world and market and in general, what are the main challenges you see within the farming community?
Yeah, I think today, if we look at Denmark and Sweden, Norway, I think to sum it up as much as I can, I would say peace of mind is the challenge. And why do I say that? Well, I think if we look at Danish and Swedish industry, if we talk about eggs and poultry meat, for example, both which have been classified as Salmonella and Campylobacter free for many years, which is a great achievement that has been made possible through, you could say, focused efforts, large investments, obviously, education and hard work. Regulatory legislation on environmental impact of poultry farming has added to the pressure and the high demand on the poultry farmer. And of course, each of the poultry farmers in Denmark and Sweden, they know perfectly well that they have to be amongst the best in class. Otherwise, they're simply out of business. If you're not the best of the best in a very highly competitive market, you're simply out of business. So if you look at the increased regulatory legislation, the pressure from the meat processing companies, increased demand from the authorities on handing in reports and documenting traceability, the farmer has less and less time to focus on the core business, which is, taking care and often growing birds. And I think this is the main challenge, to stay ahead and among, you could say, probably the top 5 in the industry, while at the same time coping with the changes in the market, because consumer behavior changes, political changes, and so on and so forth. And with all of that, the farmer still needs to remain cool, calm, and collected. And I think the only way to do that is to have a complete transparency throughout the production, throughout the farm, to have data. Occurrences and status from the different houses collected and made available 24/7. So that's why I said initially, I think the main challenge here is peace of mind, because that's what everybody wants. I mean, you want to know that your business is being run in a professional way. You want to know that you will make a profit, and at the same time, you need also, and I think all of us can appreciate that, peace of mind. So I think that's the challenge.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Hans-Henrik, the Danish, Denmark is well known globally for its scale of swine or pig production, and you've got some very, very large companies involved in the industry, not just in Denmark, but they spread their wings in other parts of Europe also with pig production. What's the main drivers for success? Why is Denmark such a successful pig growing country?
Yeah, it's a valid question, Jim, and I think it's a question that I meet a lot when I travel around the world. I've been for the past years involved in plenty of seminars where I've been invited to talk about the Danish pig industry, Southeast Asia, and many different parts of the world. And I think what what definitely sets Danish pig industry aside from probably all other countries is that for the past more than 100 years, all the Danish pig farmers, they have belonged to a cooperative that was founded originally to consolidate, you could say, the common interest of growing pigs. And from the very start, a certain amount of each produced pig in Denmark was reinvested into research and development that would benefit everybody belonging to the cooperative. So this structure still today is unique, and it's definitely what's ensured Danish pig production a place or a seat or a position as being the most efficient anywhere in the world. Today we see Danish genetics, whether it's live gilts for breeding, or if it's frozen embryos or semen, exported to all countries, all corners of the world. And if we look into Denmark and the industry, it's no longer uncommon to see sows producing 40 plus piglets per sow per year, which is a very, very high number. And if we move further down the production into the finisher stage, we see average daily gains of more than a kilogram, meaning that we spend only 85 to 90 days from a 30 kilo weaner to 120 kilo slaughter ready pig. So you could say feed conversion and the lean fat ratio of a Danish pig is simply unparalleled.
That's amazing, and it's a great achievement for the industry. But if we come back to one of your previous comments about the peace of mind for the farmers, about the sustainability and regulations that are within the business or coming from the government, that requires a lot of data collection, right? Because you need to document everything, and we cannot underestimate the benefits of collecting of the data. So, what are the poultry farmers or pig farmers are doing about that? Like how they collect the data and how they incorporate all the data in their businesses?
Well, I think there's a great span on how people do that today. From, you could say, probably a more primitive or manual kind of process where you simply walk into your production facility and observe with your own eyes how the animals are behaving. That's the good old-fashioned way of keeping track. Of course, the challenge there is if you notice something which is out of order, or if the behavior is not as it should be, then it suddenly becomes you could say, a battle against the clock to find the source of that. Is it because the water intake has been reduced? Is it something wrong with the feed, with the ventilation? Is the temperature wrong? The pressure, ammonia level in the air? There's a lot of different parameters that you need to suddenly get involved with in terms of figuring out what's wrong at a short time as possible. At the other end of that scale, obviously, you have farmers that have been incorporating technology over the years and who are using technology to benefit the production and the business as a whole. And I think to these guys, one of the challenges, at least, is that what we see, and I think that's not unique to Denmark, I think that's, wherever you go, is that you invest in technology within certain areas of your production. It could be feed management, it could be weighing of your animals, it could be ventilation, different areas you invest in technology. And I think the challenge is that in many cases, if not all, these different technologies, they don't really communicate well. So as a farmer, you still need to spend quite a lot of time gathering info or data from different sources in order to try and collect and understand it. And I think if we look at the success of the Danish pig and poultry and dairy industry, as I was talking about before, we also have to understand the importance of good management, a high level of education. And the last one, which I think is really important, is the real-time data management and analysis. Because, I think to most farmers, not only in Denmark, but I think everybody will agree that if you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business. So I think to the farmer, it's also a question of, how quickly can you get to know your numbers? How difficult is it?
Yeah, indeed. It's really interesting to hear you talking about data and how, the farmers in both pig, swine and dairy operations over there recognize the importance of data. And, there are multiple benefits of collecting data, but leveraging that within your business, including time saving, I guess, from just recording data, capturing data, and then how it's used to project feed consumption and feed orders, or how it's used to project final slaughter weights and all of that. I mean, is that something that is readily accepted? I mean, is there software out there doing that type of thing? I mean, how are farmers doing that today?
Yeah, like I said before, I think most farmers, they've sort of maybe invented their own kind of system, if we couldn't call it that, meaning that they collect data. Perhaps under ventilation, they have a modern climate controller, which is connected to the web, meaning that on their smartphone, he or she can actually see the status in real time, temperature, pressure, humidity, and so on. But don't get any information on feed, for example, necessarily, or water, or mortality, or any other parameter which might be of equal importance. So I think, I guess like in most places, ideally, a broiler farmer, for example, he wants to deliver a 2.2 kilo bird to the processor, and at the same time have 0 feed left in the silo. So I think, in order to achieve this, it's vital to have this real-time data collection from the broiler houses. And I think monitoring growth, feed water intake, climate, air quality, in order to be able to communicate also efficiently to the processor, the ideal time for pickup, time for ordering feed, and so on. That's vital. And I think everybody wants to achieve this. Everybody wants to do this. And how you go about it is very different from farmer to farmer, because as I said, in Scandinavia, of course, there's lots of technology available. And I think that many farmers, they have their own way of doing things, whether it's an Excel spreadsheet or a notepad, or maybe a bespoke system of sorts that kind of takes care of, let's say, 80 or 90% of their requirement, and the remaining part they try and estimate on their own. So there's technology, but I think the problem or the challenge is that there's no easy way to get around this in the current market. It's not like you can just go on the internet and punch in your password, and then you can actually access data from your own production that gives you this peace of mind that we were talking about before. So I would say definitely in big demand, Jim. Available at the moment, and not so much in Scandinavian market, and that's why I think it's super exciting that we get to talk about Amino today, because I think that's the answer to a lot of this.
Yeah, and exactly like you said, you can log into a web page and get all of your data. But it looks like there's a lot of technology already in the market, and especially in terms of equipment. The farmers get smart controllers, and they gather all the data from the equipment, and they would really benefit from data management systems. Like you said, they would need to do a lot of planning, and that will get them more efficient. But I also have some question that is related to the industry here. So farmers usually quite how do I say, it's quite traditional market, right? And do you see that many more younger people are getting into farming? Like, can you see some like second, third generation farmers out there?
Yeah, we do. And I think, in terms of technology, it's certainly being adopted throughout. I think for Danish and Swedish, Norwegian farmers today, it's all about control and constant optimizing. So, technology is key to achieving this. And maybe the younger generation in certain aspects are more tech savvy, but I wouldn't underestimate. I mean, if you look at the sort of average farmer in Scandinavia, they know that technology is key to success, and obviously the younger generation does. And I think in Denmark, for example, we are faced with the same challenge as many other countries, is that it's hard to attract skilled labor into the industry. In Denmark, we're fortunate enough to have some of the best agricultural education systems, and we do get lots of young people through those. Classes are getting smaller, but we still have young people getting into the industry, which is super great. And I think those young people that we get into contact with, whether it's in Denmark or Sweden, they have they have a different starting point because they are very much focused on the technical side. And they automatically expect that Munters, for example, taking care of ventilation, cooling, heating, and also environmental technology, that, of course, we have systems that will support this, systems that will collect data and will help them analyze. And I think that's a natural kind of development, and it's certainly adopted, and it's also accepted into the industry that we need to know our numbers. And I think the younger generation probably more having a more natural relationship in some cases with the technology.
Yeah, that's great to hear that the farmers are really hungry for technology and they're adopting well it, and there are more younger farmers, of course. That is a very, very good sign.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hans-Henrik, it's been great talking to you this afternoon. We've talked about quite a few subjects. The first thing, and you qualified, you pass, you have to have a passion for farming on this podcast, and you got there immediately. So that's great. I mean, we love talking to people about farming and poultry and swine and things. And it's been good talking through your experience of the Danish industry, how it's structured, talking a little bit about both poultry and swine. And I mean, obviously these larger swine companies based in Denmark are really fascinating story, how they've developed and how they've kind of, grown, and they've made it successful, and they've invested a lot in R&D. I mean, that's an exceptional story out of Denmark. And then good talking to you about data management and the recognition that data is incredibly important across the farming sectors, and the importance that Danish and Swedish farmers are giving to data. I'm encouraged by the little opportunity you mentioned there in terms of somewhere to bring all this data together to leverage it and make it more useful perhaps and quicker to access and analyze for the farmers. I think I'm encouraged by that opportunity, and then also the use of technology is readily accepted, as you say, within the Scandinavian market. So it's great, and pleasure talking to you again today. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, well, you're welcome, guys. It was great being on this podcast, and I've been following it, obviously, and I think it's tremendous good value to have these discussions. And like you said yourself, Jim, initially, to try and exchange experience, but also different traits from the different regions, because agriculture, I mean, growing a pig is the same whether you do it in Denmark or in Australia or in Vietnam. It's only the climate that differs. So we just gotta adapt to that. And if we can apply this technology and ensure this peace of mind, I think that's key in the next steps of food production.
Great. Thanks, Hans-Henrik. And thanks everyone who watched this episode. And not to miss new episodes, please join us on social media. We are on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Instagram. And see you next week.
See you next week, Nick.
See you next.